December 20th, 1968. Lake Herman Road, a remote stretch of countryside on the outskirts of Vallejo, California. 17-year-old David Faraday had taken his 16-year-old girlfriend, Betty Lou Jensen, out for the evening. They parked near a gate at the end of the road. A quiet spot. Private. The kind of place teenagers go when they want to be alone. At some point that night, another car pulled up alongside them. What happened next took less than a minute. David was shot once in the head at close range. Betty Lou ran. She made it less than 30 feet before 5 bullets struck her in the back. She died on that road. David died on the way to the hospital. Police arrived to find 2 teenagers dead in the cold California night. No witnesses, no motive, no suspect. They had no idea it was only the beginning. 7 months passed. Then, in the early hours of July 5th, 1969, a man called the Vallejo Police Department from a payphone 2 blocks from headquarters. His voice was low and flat, almost mechanical. He said, "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." He had just attacked Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau at Blue Rock Springs Park. Darlene was 22. She was a wife, a mother, and a popular waitress. Michael was 19. They had been sitting in a parked car when a man approached, shone a bright light through the window, and opened fire. Darlene was shot multiple times. She died on arrival at the hospital. Michael survived, but barely. He described the attacker as a heavy-set white man around 5'8", with curly brown hair and a large face. Then, 3 weeks later, something unprecedented happened. 3 letters arrived simultaneously at 3 Bay Area newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Each letter contained 1/3 of a cipher, a cryptogram made of symbols, letters, and strange characters. The writer claimed to be the killer. He demanded that the newspapers print the ciphers on their front pages. If they didn't, he said, he would go on a killing rampage. He signed each letter with a crosshair symbol, a circle divided by a cross. Like a gun sight. He called himself the Zodiac. On August 27th, 1969, the Zodiac struck again. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were students at Pacific Union College. They were picnicking at Lake Berryessa, a reservoir in the hills of Napa County, when a man approached them wearing a bizarre costume. He wore a black hood over his head. On the hood was a white circle with a crossed pattern, the Zodiac symbol. He carried a gun and a knife. He tied them both up. Then he stabbed them. Brian survived, badly wounded. Cecilia did not. She died 2 days later in hospital. But what the Zodiac did next was almost theatrical. He walked to Brian's car and used a felt-tip pen to write on the door. 3 dates, 3 attacks, 7 victims, and a circle with a cross. Then he called the Napa County Sheriff's Department to report the attack, from a payphone, leaving his fingerprints on the receiver. Less than 2 weeks later, on October 11th, 1969, the Zodiac killed again. Paul Stein was 28 years old, a student and a taxi driver. That night, he picked up a fare in San Francisco and drove toward the Presidio Heights neighborhood. At the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets, his passenger shot him once in the head. 3 teenagers witnessed the man from their window above. They called police. Officers were dispatched, but due to a radio miscommunication, they were told to look for a black suspect. A white man matching the actual description walked past responding officers in the street. He was never stopped. After the Stein murder, the Zodiac wrote to the San Francisco Chronicle. In the letter, he included a piece of Paul Stein's bloodied shirt as proof. And then he taunted the police. He said he could disguise himself, change his appearance, walk right past them. He had already proved it. The ciphers are what made the Zodiac unlike any killer before him. He sent 4 coded messages to the press over the course of his campaign. Each one was a puzzle, a grid of symbols, letters, numbers, and characters that appeared to be a substitution cipher, with each symbol representing a letter of the alphabet. The first cipher, called the Z408 for its 408 characters, was cracked within a week of publication. Not by the FBI, not by professional code breakers, by a high school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty, working at their kitchen table. What the cipher said was chilling. It read in part, "I like killing people because it's so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." He also wrote that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife, that when he died, they would serve him in paradise. The second cipher, 340 characters, known as the Z340, was sent to the Chronicle in November 1969. For 51 years, it sat unsolved, defeating cryptographers, amateur code breakers, and intelligence professionals alike. Then, in December 2020, a team of 3 amateur code breakers, working independently across 3 different countries, cracked it. The message began, "I hope you're having lots of fun in trying to catch me." 2 ciphers remain unsolved to this day. One of them, the Z13, just 13 characters long, may contain the Zodiac's real name. Nobody has cracked it. The investigation into the Zodiac killer became one of the largest manhunts in California history. Multiple agencies were involved: the San Francisco Police Department, Vallejo Police, the Napa County Sheriff, the FBI. Thousands of tips poured in. By 2009, investigators had looked into an estimated 2,500 suspects. Only a handful were considered credible. The primary suspect, yet the only person ever publicly named by police, was a man named Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was a former elementary school teacher and convicted sex offender from Vallejo. Several of his friends came forward to say he had told them he wanted to hunt people, that he had called himself the Zodiac, that he had described targeting couples in remote areas. He wore a Zodiac brand watch, the same brand the killer referenced in one of his letters. During one of his killings, the Zodiac wore size 10.5 Wingwalker boots. Allen wore size 10.5 shoes. His handwriting was analyzed. His car was searched. His home was raided twice. And then, in the early 2000s, DNA extracted from the saliva on the stamps and envelopes of the Zodiac's letters was compared to Arthur Lee Allen's profile. It didn't match. Allen died in 1992. Never charged. Never conclusively linked to a single murder. The DNA result closed the door on the most credible suspect in the case. Since then, more names have surfaced. In 2021, a group of investigators called the Case Breakers publicly named Gary Francis Post, an Air Force veteran and house painter who died in 2018, as their prime suspect. They pointed to forehead scars that matched witness descriptions and claimed to find his name encoded in one of the unsolved ciphers. The FBI reviewed the claim. Their response was brief. The case remains open. So why, after over 50 years, has the Zodiac never been identified? The answer isn't simple, but several factors stand out. The Zodiac was careful. Unlike most serial killers, he didn't follow a consistent pattern that made him easy to profile. He attacked in different locations using different methods. A gun at Lake Herman Road, a gun at Blue Rock Springs, a knife and a gun at Lake Berryessa, a gun in San Francisco, different counties, different jurisdictions, different investigating agencies. In 1968 and 1969, there was no centralized database connecting crimes across county lines. Each department worked its own case. Nobody was coordinating the full picture. He was also intelligent. The ciphers, the letters, the theatrical touches, the costume at Lake Berryessa, the phone calls to police, the pieces of victims' clothing mailed to newspapers, all of it suggested a man who was not just committing crimes, but constructing a performance. He wanted to be famous, he wanted the attention, and he understood that the more theatrical he was, the more he would be chased, and the more he would dominate the headlines. And then he simply stopped. The last confirmed Zodiac letter was received in 1974. 5 years after the attacks began, he went silent. Nobody knows why. He may have died. He may have been imprisoned for another crime. He may have simply decided to stop, satisfied with the chaos he had created. If the Zodiac was between 25 and 40 years old during the 1968 killings, he would be between 82 and 97 years old today. He may still be alive somewhere. The California Department of Justice lists the case as open. So does the FBI. So do the Vallejo Police Department, the Napa County Sheriff, and multiple other agencies. They haven't given up. After half a century, could finally give up its secrets. Maybe the Z13 can too. Maybe 13 characters are all that stand between the world and knowing who the Zodiac killer really was. We're still waiting.